What would it take for Games Workshop, for Warhammer 40,000 to go defunct? Essentially turn into X-Wing miniatures. And what was interesting about this conversation was with a friend after we were playing X-Wing miniatures. We've got a lot of stuff for X-Wing 1.0. And it was really interesting how at the time X-Wing released 1.0, we got a lot of ships. It built up, and literally over the course of 4 years, 3 or 4 years, it had replaced Warhammer 40K and was the number one selling game. Not only kind of locally, just in the meta, what I could see table-wise, and we have a massive 40K community here, but just in trade sales. And in my opinion, that made Games Workshop very, very nervous. And that's where you started to see, in my opinion, three things really accelerate. The first was model releases where you had to get more stuff out there. You had to get updates out there. You can't have someone playing Dark Eldar that haven't gotten a Codex update in 15 years. Second was FOMO, fear of missing out. This is where limited releases got crazy. Impulse buys. I got to buy this. I got to buy this. I got to buy this. But then we started to see this diversification, not only in collectibles, collectible coins and custom books and editions, but also in digital content and 40K in other areas, where X-Wing was just X-Wing. But of course, Fantasy Flight, and I have numerous Fantasy Flight titles, and I love the games. But at that time in true Fantasy Flight, version 2 is coming. It's just built into their DNA. And how fast X-Wing fell, now you could say, well, Games Workshop owns the 40K IP. They're going to produce it. They don't own Star Wars IP, Fantasy Flight. X-Wing was going to go away at some point, but the jump to 2.0 was just a little bit, it killed it for various reasons. And now, at least here in my local meta, no one really plays X-Wing. And you're like, it's Star Wars. So this idea of Games Workshop, as it gets bolder and bolder and charges more and more and just doesn't seem to really view 3D printing as a threat, and maybe it isn't, maybe it is, maybe it isn't. The question that we had, my friend and I were like, well, what would it take for Games Workshop to kind of go like X-Wing miniatures? What would it take to have 40K just not really be played, essentially become like Warhammer Fantasy, the old world? Now that they killed deliberately, but in exploring it for 40K, it's not going anywhere soon. And the strength that I see of it is the models, the diversification. You're starting to see moving into media. It has how old is 40K? I think it was a couple of years ago. BattleTech just did 35 years. So I think like 40K is 40 years. 40 years of 40K. I think we had that, or it's close to it, or it's a little past it. I don't see it. It's just too much of a juggernaut moving there. What I would see is what I kind of question and really wonder about is, given how profitable Games Workshop is, it's a duality of how profitable they are, but also for whatever reason, and I'm right there with it, playing 40K. So it's not like I'm saying this and I'm not like participating in this as a completionist and a wargamer with poor impulse. Paying $100+ for one model, paying $50 for one figure. You're like, but I got to have this guy lead my army. I got to have this limited release. I got to playing that. What they have is both the reach and the diversification of 40K, but also just the community conditioned to just buying these miniatures and doing this. And 3D printing doesn't seem to be stopping it. Now, things might change fast, but what I think about is Games Workshop isn't going anywhere. It's going to continue its juggernaut role. Some years might be better than others, but given that, do we want to say trifecta of a very unique, crazy customer base, record profits, and diversification, I see 40K. I don't even want to name that company, but Dungeons and Dragons, seeing what's happening to that, where it became so big and so profitable, it was purchased. Could something buy out Games Workshop, and it's either Games Workshop in name only, or it's not Games Workshop, and then 40K radically changes. No more Grimdark. And at that point, you see the game unravel. But then it's like Dungeons & Dragons. It's not really D&D. It's not really 40K. It is a completely different game. And there's nothing wrong with that, seeing how D&D Next has evolved. But it's not really D&D from that perspective. So I see that happening more than just some kind of anomaly comes out of the warp and just destroys 40K. But whether you're a 40K enthusiast or not, even if you're a wargamer, you've seen 40K, you've seen the Juggernaut. In your opinion, is there anything that could kill 40K? And is it more likely 40K or Games Workshop as a whole being acquired? That's I think, a bigger, more complex and more interesting question